Okay, so we're recording now, Eric. And
Okay.
I apologize for that rocky start.
No,
So,
that's fine. That's
um,
fine.
anyhow, we have Eric Bell here who's going to talk about tax mitigation on highly appreciated residential properties. So, thank you for joining us. And Eric, I'll turn it over to you.
All right. Thanks, Kim, and thank Manny for letting me be on this presentation today.
Sure.
Um, I'm going to talk about one particular way to defer capital gain tax or mitigate your tax liability on a sale of a highly appreciated residential property. It could be commercial, it could be any private asset. So any privately held asset can use this strategy to mitigate or defer on a long-term basis your capital gain. It's called the monetized installment sale, M453 transaction, and I call it MIST for short. This is a presentation I did probably about 2 years ago for a merger and acquisition company for businesses that were selling and buying businesses, but it can also be used for real estate. In California, we have the highest capital gain rate. It says 33% there, but what they didn't add in is it's an additional 3.8 for the Affordable Health Care Act. The total capital gain tax in California is 37.1%. Again, I said it could be used for any privately held asset. We're going to talk specifically about real estate. The M in there means monetize. Simple, a simple definition for monetize for this situation is just coupling sale with a loan. It's really that simple. We're going to be coupling an installment sale with a loan. 453 is the tax code for an installment sale. It was created 27 years ago by an attorney here in California whose client was selling property up in the Pacific Northwest. So it's been around for a long time. It's been looked at by the IRS. There's an IRS memorandum dated 2012 that says this strategy is okay. I'm going to use $10 million as my dollar amount just to keep it all simplified and easy for everybody to understand and follow me. So it keeps the math simple. So when you're in escrow, the buyer and seller must have an agreement. That's an escrow. When you're in escrow, what you would do is just give me a call. I would learn more about the seller, more about his or hers or the family's, objective. We can do this right for them. And then we would interject what they call a dealer in capital assets. That's also like a qualified intermediary, like in a 1031 exchange. So capital assets is in the middle of this transaction, and this is what's going to create the liquidity, but also the deferment for the seller. First step is that the seller is going to sell his property or her property or their home to the dealer in capital assets. In exchange, they're going to get a note interest only for 30 years at 5.7%. So again, the seller is going to sell their asset or their property to the dealer in capital assets, the qualified intermediary, on an interest only note at 5.7%, and it's going to be a 30-year note. So now the seller, if you look underneath the seller and the 10 million, they have a 1099 coming to them for interest that they receive on an annual basis. The second step, the dealer in capital assets is going to make an introduction to a lender who is familiar, a private lender who is familiar with this transaction, and they're going to loan the seller 95% of their sale price. So in this case, it'd be $9.5 million to the seller. That loan will be interest only at 6% for 30 years. So now I put 1098 there because people are familiar with that, but really what the seller is going to get is a ledger statement every year for the interest that they're paying to the private lender. So if you do the math, 5.7% on 10 million is 570,000. 6% on 9.5 million is also 570,000. So you have a statement for interest received and interest paid that offset each other to zero. At this point, the seller has $9.5 million in their pocket to use at their discretion. So this allows you to help them buy more real estate. They have cash. Cash is king, we know, in real estate. They can buy whatever they want. There's no restrictions in terms of what they buy or how they use the proceeds. So that's the gist of what's going on, what we just talked about here. I'll recap this one time. The first step, the seller is going to sell the property to the dealer in capital assets, which is also a qualified intermediary. They're going to get an interest-only note at 5.7%. That interest-only note is going to be for a 30-year period. They're also going to get step two, they're going to get introduced to a private lender, a separate party, a private lender from the dealer in capital assets that's going to give a loan for 95% of their sale price, or $9.5 million. That's also a loan interest only for 30 years. When you look at the math on this, 6% on 9.5 million is 570,000. 5.7% on 10 million is 570,000 to offset themselves. The seller will never get that extra 500,000. That's what the dealer capital assets is going to keep as their fee. So moving on to the third step, the dealer in capital assets under the escrow agreement is going to just turn around as if it was a pass-through, like in a 1031 exchange, and sell that property to the end user buyer. And that buyer will have clear title, okay? So they have clear title, they're happy, the seller's happy, they have $9.5 million in their pocket. The buyer in exchange for that property is going to pay the dealer in capital assets the $10 million. So now the dealer in capital assets has the 10 million from the original, because that was the original agreement and sale price. The seller has his 9.5 million, and the buyer of the property has clear title on the property. The dealer in capital assets, the way they make money is during 30 years, is they invest that money and they make money over and above the 5.7% that they're paying out above to the seller on an annual basis. So 30 years goes by, and in the 30th year is the final step. And that final step on a 30th year, remember the dealer in capital assets had the $10 million. They are going to pay off the $9.5 million loan on behalf of the seller. It's all in the documents. They will keep the $500,000 at that time as a performance bonus. That's the transaction. Now, when I saw it like this, I was a little bit concerned. I was like, okay, what if the dealer in capital assets files bankruptcy, or they're gone, or something happens and they no longer exist? The private lender, to protect himself and also to protect the seller, has put in place 3 different escrows. The first escrow is for the money being received by the seller. And the second escrow is money that the seller will be paying to the private. So it's not like the seller has to write a check. It's all a paper transaction being done through the escrows. At the end of every year, though, the seller will get the 1099 for his money that he had received, and he'll also get that ledger statement from a tax standpoint, so he can offset the two. And Form 6252 will be filed by his accountant for the installment note. And then the final escrow is to ensure that that final step happens and the loan gets paid off. So I'm going to recap it. That's the entire transaction. I'm going to start from step 1 and take you all the way through step 4, the final step. The first step, seller is going to sell the asset, the property, to the dealer in capital assets, which is a qualified intermediary. The second step is the DCA, the dealer in capital assets, will introduce to the seller a lender that's going to loan them 95% of their sale price. In this case, it will be $9.5 million that will come to him at the close of escrow, or to the seller at the close of escrow. That loan will be on an interest-only basis at 6% for 30 years. So again, the seller has $9.5 million in their pocket so far at the end of escrow. The DCA owns the asset. The third step, the seller passes off and sells the asset to the buyer. The buyer in exchange gives the dealer in capital assets the $10 million, in which the dealer in capital assets can invest that to earn interest or money over and above the 5.7% they're paying on an annual basis to the seller. And the buyer also, they will sign what they call a cooperation clause, meaning that they understand that the dealer in capital assets sold it to them, but any, miscommunications or misrepresentation in the property doesn't fall on the dealer in capital assets. It falls back onto the seller, the original seller. The 30 years goes by, dealer in capital assets is making money, the property, seller has his money in his pocket. 30 years, final step happens where the dealer in capital assets will pay that loan off. And then that loan is gone, and capital gain tax is due years. So there's 3 escrows put in place to protect both the seller and the private lender, that all payments are being made, and that the 30 years, that the final step of paying off the loan actually happens. Here's some math that I look at. For every $100,000 that the seller has in their pocket, if they can just get 5% on that money, it's worth $430,000 over 30 years. Also, if you look at a rate of inflation at 3%, you end up discounting the tax by about 60%. So you're dealing with 40-cent dollars, 30 years from now. It's kind of a win-win for the seller. And if there's an extreme example on a $10 million sale where there is no basis, that's a savings of about $3.7 million that the seller would save in capital gain tax due. When we look at the offsetting costs, and I'm going to go right there, we see that there's a 5% difference between what the seller received and what the sale price was. That's 5%. The lender is going to charge 1.5% for his loan. So technically, if we look at it, the seller really has 93.5% of his sale price in his pocket because of the cost of the lender. This can be used as a to a 1031 exchange. It can be used in the 11th hour to save a 1031 exchange. There's 3 questions that most people have. What if I die before taxes are due 30 years from now? I'll address that in a second. How do you pay those taxes in 30 years? That's going to be the same equation that also. The one question I can't answer is, what will tax rates be 30 years from now? I have no idea. We assume about a 50% rate, even though it's only 37.1. I rather overestimate and overdeliver versus underestimate and not have enough money for the client to pay their taxes. What we can do during that 30-year period, a lot of clients do this, is we establish and put together an insurance policy for the 30-year period that take care of the capital gain. So if the gain was $10 million, for example, no basis, $10 million capital gain, at 50%, we would probably do a $5 million insurance policy on the client if they wanted to go ahead and pay those taxes 30 years from now. If they're older, in their 70s, that makes sense because they'll probably pass away during that 30 years. If they're a younger client, 40s or 50s, there's a good chance they probably will be alive 30 years from now. We'll do a different case design on the insurance policy that will allow them to have enough cash value in that insurance policy to pay the taxes off in a 30-year time frame. That's really all I got, Kim. Let's go through it again. You're on mute, Kim.
Sorry. We have a question for someone in the West Side office who would like to know, can you go over what you said about if the DCA or the concern of the DCA going into bankruptcy?
Right. Bottom there, bottom right-hand side, you see the 3. Those escrows are to protect the private lender to receive his payments, and also the seller to receive their payments, and also that final escrow to ensure that the final step happens to pay off the loan in 30 years from now. So that money's held kind of in an escrow. So if the DCA goes away, it's all protected. So it protects both the seller and also the private lender. Private lender wants to make sure he gets his money 30 years from now for sure for that loan. I hope that answers the question. If not, you can always call me. I'm going to share with everyone contact information when we finish the questions. Any other questions, Kim?
And then is the note only for 30 years? Are there options there?
Correct. This particular strategy, the monetized installment sale, is for a 30-year time frame. There's other strategies, and I'm familiar with those. I'm not going to today, but we can defer that tax significantly longer in perpetuity using an asset strategy. It's a little bit more involved, but I have the tax attorney that can get that done for you also.
Okay. And I don't know if anyone else on the Zoom call wants to unmute and ask a question.
You know, Kim, what people like about this strategy is that what the seller likes about this strategy is they walk away with money in their pocket to spend and invest however they want to. So it's a win-win for them. Like I said, we look at the math of a 30-year time frame and discounting that 10 years from now is significant, 60% discount on the tax. And if you can just get 5% on every $100,000 that you saved in taxes, it multiplies out to about $430,000 over that time frame.
And then did you say when is the right time frame to start this process? You said when, just before escrow or?
No, during escrow.
During escrow.
Give me a call. We can put all the paper. We're doing one right now. It was already in escrow. We only had 10 days left of the escrow, but we need probably about 48 hours to put the paperwork together. But let us know the thing we like to do. So the client's going to get up top, they're going to get a note, you know, that they can review or their attorney can review on their behalf. They're also going to get loan documents that need to be reviewed by their attorney. So we like to get those documents to the client in plenty of time so they can review it with their attorneys or their tax advisors to make sure everything says what we told them it said and they're comfortable with it. So the sooner the better.
Right.
But during the escrow period is when you should give me a call.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay, I guess not. Well, we'll put this on our Facebook page, and we'll also upload the class recording to our YouTube channel. So it will be there for people to review and access who weren't able to make it. And
let me share something else with you real quick.
Okay. And maybe some contact info too, where they can.
Can you see that?
No, not yet.
All right. Here we go. Here's my contact info.
Okay, got it. Yeah. Perfect.
Yeah, call me, email me. If you have something, you're talking to someone, if you want me to talk to a client ahead of time so they can get their arms around it, their tax advisors, we can do a Zoom with them. We can meet face to face. We want everybody to be comfortable. We want their advisors to be comfortable. We want the agents to be comfortable. We want everybody to be comfortable with this transaction and fully understand it. And we can lay out other options also, like the deferral in perpetuity. We can talk about other options, but this one, a lot of people like it. It's been around for 27 years. As I said earlier, there's an IRS memorandum from the chief counsel of the IRS saying this is an okay strategy to use. This was looked at in conjunction one time during the 27 years, my understanding. None of my clients, but it was looked at one time in conjunction with an audit on something else, and the IRS passed on it. They said there was no change on this particular strategy. So it's a very safe and conservative way to defer taxes on any appreciated real estate.
And Eric, this would work on residential properties at any price point?
Well, $1 million or greater.
Okay.
So the property would be $1 million, have to be going for $1 million, which is pretty easy to find in California. $1 million or
Yeah.
greater, it would work. We really want to weigh the fees associated with the gain. So I had a client, Villa Park, here in Orange County. After we did all the math, we took the deduction out because they were a married couple, which was $500,000 total. We were going to save them about $39,000 in capital gain tax. So they decided they wanted to just go ahead and pay that tax. So once we have once we're talking to someone, we do the math in terms of how it's going to really work for them. That's when they can make a determination if it's going to be their best interest to move forward. But we have older couples now that bought their houses for $40,000, $50,000, and they're selling them for $2 million. It definitely makes sense in those cases if they want to sell them. Or their
Right.
children are selling them on their behalf. Yeah.
Right. And then just curious, do you have some program details, just like in a flyer form or something to have in the hands of the agent? They want
No,
to.
we don't advertise this. We prefer that someone like me talk about it. When it comes
I
time for
see.
the documents, we just don't want to. We don't want to broadcast this and advertise it. So I don't want to say it's a secret because it's not, but a lot of folks don't know about it. To me, it's kind of an arrow in their quiver, something that makes them different from the other agents that they're competing with. If they can approach it,
Right.
say, I can help you probably sell this and defer the capital gains on a long-term basis. I think a lot of clients will listen. It'll be a differentiator for the agent possibly. So just give me a call and we can take them through it.
Okay.
But we do not have something that we could share with them, a flyer or anything of that sort. No.
Okay, that's good to know.
All right.
All right. Well, thank you so much for your time and for all the information, Eric. And like I said, we'll put this on our YouTube so the other agents can access it. And I appreciate it.
Okay. Well, thanks for having me. Tell Mitty I said hi.
Okay.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.